I got the divorce email at 3:43 a.m., somewhere over the Mediterranean. At T-38, I was a senior pilot for a major international airline. I'd flown hundreds of routes, crossed countless time zones, but nothing had prepared me for the turbulence that hit me in that moment. The subject line was short. Let's be mature about this, the message itself. 3 sentences. I've filed for divorce. I've moved out. I've closed our joint accounts. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at the screen in the dim glow of the cockpit standby lights. My co-pilot was asleep next to me, and the world below was silent, still unaware that a man thousands of feet in the air had just lost his marriage. My name is Adrian. I'd spent the last 12 years married to a woman I thought I understood. Elise. She was smart, driven, beautiful in a composed sort of way. We met when I was still flying military cargo missions, both of us in our late 20s, full of belief that life would always stay clean and linear, but something had shifted: the pandemic, the isolation, the months I'd spent flying humanitarian. Elise had begun pulling away. Fewer video calls. One-word replies. Excuses for why she couldn't come on layovers. I noticed the signs. I'm not stupid. But I also wasn't ready to believe the worst. I didn't reply to her email. Not at first. I closed my laptop, adjusted the autopilot, and stared out into the endless dark above the clouds for the next 6 hours. I flew in complete silence. When we landed in Zurich, I went through the motions. Park the aircraft. Log the flight. Shake hands. Smile politely. But inside, I was cracking open that night in a hotel room overlooking Lake Geneva. I opened our banking app. Zero. She'd taken it all. The savings account we'd built up over a decade. The emergency fund. The travel nest egg. Gone. Transferred to an unrecognized account. I sat in that room with the curtains open and the lake shining cold and silver outside. I didn't cry. That's not how I work. But I did go still. Utterly, terrifyingly still. I could hear the room clock ticking. Could hear my pulse in my ears. Could feel the weight of knowing that everything I thought I could count on had just vanished in the space of a few keystrokes, and for the first time in years, I felt small, gutted, alone. I called my brother Ethan, a retired Navy JAG now working in private practice. He didn't ask questions, just listened. You want me to look into it? He said, no. Not yet, I said. Just needed to hear a voice that wasn't hers. He understood. The next day, I filed for emergency financial disclosure. A formality. Mostly. Elise was clever. She'd covered her tracks. But it gave me something to do, a task to lean on, a structure in the chaos. I stayed abroad for another 2 weeks. Flying gave me cover. Altitude gave me peace. But every night, I went back to the same question. How could she do this without even looking me in the eye? She wasn't like this when we met. Elise had studied art history. She loved color, contrast, museums. When we moved into our first apartment, she filled it with light and canvases. She once said flying made her nervous, but loved hearing my stories about gliding through lightning storms, about moonlight over the Atlantic. She said I grounded her. So when did she become the one who made me feel unmoored? I returned to the States on a red-eye from Amsterdam. She wasn't at the house, of course, she wasn't. But her scent still lingered in the hallway. Her mug was still on the sink. She'd taken everything from the safe, but left behind a note on the fridge. Please respect my decision. We've grown apart. There was no apology, just that. I spent the next 48 hours in a fog. Ate nothing. Slept barely. I'd stare at the walls we'd painted together, the couch we'd picked after 3 arguments and 1 trip to IKEA, and I'd feel like I was watching a life I didn't belong to anymore. By the 3rd day, I opened the closet to find some of my clothes missing, and a receipt 1200 for a hotel downtown. She'd paid with our joint credit card before the account was closed. That was the first moment I truly snapped, not violently, but in a way that reshaped me. I stopped hoping she'd come back. I stopped waiting for closure. Instead, I pulled out a notepad and began writing. Check mortgage details, freeze credit lines, consult ETH and on asset tracing, review flight schedule, ask for time off, check security cam. His story was no longer husband. I was a strategist. There was one more thing. Find out who he is, because Elise didn't do this alone. She had help. Someone who knew how to disappear money without triggering flags. Someone who knew I was 38, childless, often overseas, with predictable deployment schedules. Someone who waited until I was airborne to strike. I went to the bank the next day, asked to review our withdrawal logs. The manager hesitated, but I flashed my airline ID and pressed politely, firmly. He printed them out, 6 withdrawals, all in the same week. I was flying over Africa, all in person, all just under the reporting limit. Smart, calculated. There was a name on one of the receipts, Marcus D. N.O. last name. But enough to start. I called. Ethan, you ready to fight this? He asked. I don't want revenge, I said. He laughed. You're calling me with a bank log and a stranger's name, Adrian. You don't want revenge yet. But wait till you find out what else she's done. I didn't reply. Just looked out the window, where a storm was gathering over the city. Elise had chosen her moment carefully, but so would I. Subscribe to Revenge with DMA for more stories that expose betrayal, justice, and the quiet strength it takes to rise again. And if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, share your story in the comments. We read every one. Ethan worked fast. He always had. One of the reasons he made a damn good jag was his ability to process betrayal without flinching. He treated this like any other case, a breach of contract, financial malfeasance, asset concealment. But he also knew me too well to pretend this was just paperwork. 3 days after our call, he handed me a folder over black coffee and silence in his kitchen. Marcus Delaney, he said. 39. Works in private wealth consulting. No official certification. 2 minor fraud accusations. No convictions. Most interestingly, he's been connected romantically to 2 other women who surprise emptied joint accounts and filed for divorce while their partners were overseas. I stared at the page. Average-looking guy. Clean-shaven, slightly smug smile. He looked like someone who'd call women baby girl and not know how to spell integrity and Elise. I asked, still using your last name, currently staying at a luxury condo in downtown Seattle. In Marcus's name. He leases it, no mortgage. High turnover in residence, lots of cash payments. I closed the file. My hands were steady now. No tremors, no surges of heat through my skull. I was beyond anger. This was the altitude I operated best in, quiet, clinical, resolved. Did she know about his history? I asked. Ethan shrugged. Hard to say. But one thing's clear, he knew about yours. Your schedule, your assets, your trust in her. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, there's more. I looked up. She filed for a property reassessment. Claimed you'd abandoned the home. If that went through, she could have sold it with forged documents within 30 days. My jaw clenched. When? Filed a week after your last flight. To Zurich, she'd timed it with precision. Filed for divorce while I was in the air. Started the sale process as soon as she thought I wouldn't look. She knew my calendar, my layovers, the way I checked email once every 48 hours when flying international legs. She'd weaponized my profession against me. She's not that smart, I said quietly. No, Ethan agreed. But Marcus is. That night, I returned to the house. My house. The one with the oak tree she used to decorate every fall. The kitchen window, she said, felt like Tuscany, even though neither of us had ever been. I sat on the back porch for hours, just listening. I expected memories to come rushing back like a flood, but it was quiet. Too quiet. And then, for the first time since this all began, I broke, not just emotionally. Physically, my knees buckled. I sat on the ground, gripping the edge of the step, and let the silence crash into me. I cried not the cinematic kind. It was rough, unshaped, soundless. Not for Elise. Not even for the money. But for the sheer disbelief of how someone you once shared toothbrushes and fears and holidays with could turn you into a transaction. I stayed there until the first light broke over the yard. The sprinklers hissed to life. The birds were up. I wasn't, that morning. I emailed my supervisor and requested 2 months off. Stress leave. Airline protocol allowed it, especially with the circumstances. I didn't want to fly, didn't want to be 38,000 feet above the earth while my life unraveled below. I needed to be grounded. I needed a plan. Ethan and I started with the basics: file a restraining order on property changes, block the pending reassessment, and freeze the remaining joint credit line. Then we moved to intelligence gathering. I booked a room in the same building where Elise was staying, under an alias. I didn't stalk, I observed. I watched how often Marcus came and went, when Elise was alone, and who she met. It wasn't romantic obsession, it was reconnaissance. She'd started a war. I was just flying the counterstrike. I noticed something on the third night. Marcus never spent more than a few hours with her. Never slept over. Never held her hand in public. He'd show up with gifts, wine, flashy gestures, but always left quickly, usually after using her phone. I watched him from a distance as he typed rapidly, scrolling through her contacts, sometimes inserting a small black chip into the bottom of her device. The pattern was too specific to ignore. He's cloning her phone, Ethan said, after I showed him photos. Why? I asked. Because Elise thinks she's part of the plan. But she isn't. He's using her. It hit me then. She wasn't just betraying me. She was being betrayed. In parallel, I'd assumed Elise was Marcus's co-conspirator. Maybe she had been at first. But the way he distanced himself from her, the way he controlled her schedule, her communication, her access to money, it all pointed to manipulation. Have you seen her lately? Ethan asked. I nodded. Once. She looked thinner, distant, kind of scared. Then we need to move. We drafted a formal complaint to the Washington Financial Crimes Unit. We presented Marcus's history, attached data logs from cloned phones, and Ethan's legal analysis connecting the dots to suspicious transfers. We were told the case would be prioritized. That meant nothing. So I went further. I called in a favor. One I'd kept for years, Colonel Matthews, former Yusuf intelligence. He owed me after an incident in Cairo that nearly cost him his commission. I'd never asked for anything since. But this time I did. Just as I said. I don't want you to do anything illegal. I just want to know what this guy Marcus is up to. Beyond Elise, he agreed. 3 days later, he called back. Adrian, your guy has been targeting military spouses for years. 3 confirmed victims, all divorced mid-deployment, all with drained accounts and sold homes. He changes his name slightly each time, but it's him. And now he's trying to leave the country. Where to? Dubai. New ID, booked under a female alias. Leaves in 6 days. I stared at the phone. 6 days. That night, I drove past Elise's building again. And I saw something I hadn't expected. She was crying in the hallway, sitting against the elevator, phone on her lap, mascara streaked. Alone. The kind of crying that comes when the lie starts collapsing in on itself. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. The first storm had passed, but the second one that would truly level the ground between us was just beginning. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the act itself, it's realizing how long it had been happening while you were too loyal to see it. I didn't want Elise to suffer. Not in the beginning. I just wanted to reclaim what was mine, to land somewhere solid after months of being spun midair. But after that night, watching her sobbing in a hallway, Marcus probably never planned to return to. Something shifted in me. Pity, not love. Not forgiveness. Just the cold recognition that she wasn't the villain. I thought she was just the first fool in his chain. I forwarded the new intel from Colonel Matthews to Ethan. It wasn't admissible, but it painted the larger picture. Ethan cross-referenced Marcus's previous victims. One had moved to Arizona, another to a small town in Maine. Both had lost everything. One had tried to sue, but dropped the case. Too expensive, too draining. She said in a blog post buried deep in a support group forum, Marcus was a parasite. Elise was just his current host, and I was done watching. Using legal pressure and the evidence of forged bank activity, Ethan was able to freeze Marcus's known domestic accounts. But the real breakthrough came when we uncovered the alias he was flying under Marissa Danielson, female, 34, traveling for medical procedure. We sent the tip anonymously to Homeland Security. It wasn't hard to make it credible. Suspicious financial activity, stolen identity pattern, and connections to vulnerable military families. 3 days before his flight, Marcus was flagged for additional screening. His tickets were invalidated. He didn't know why. That night, Elise showed up at my house. I knew she would. She knocked once, twice. I didn't answer. I watched through the peephole as she stood there for a full minute, her arms crossed, chin quivering. Then I opened the door. She looked older. Not age, just drained. The way someone looks when they haven't slept well in weeks. I know I don't deserve to be here. She said, "You're right," I replied. She nodded. "But I need to say something." I stepped aside. Let her in. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me still needed to hear it. Or maybe because I wanted to look her in the eye one last time and know, without a doubt, that I was no longer hers. She sat on the edge of the couch. "Didn't touch anything. I didn't plan it like this," she began. "It wasn't meant to go this far. Marcus told me you had accounts I didn't know about. That you were planning to leave me once you got promoted to international long haul. He showed me emails, fake ones. I see that now, but I believed him. He said you were building a life without me." I let her speak. I didn't even know how to move the money. He walked me through it. He said we could start over. But then he started controlling everything. My phone. My time. I couldn't reach my friends. He kept saying you'd retaliate. That you'd ruin me if I tried to reach out. So I stayed silent. I didn't interrupt. Not because I sympathized, but because I knew silence was her punishment now. "I'm sorry, Adrian. I know it's worthless. I can't undo what I did. But I need you to know I wasn't trying to destroy you." I leaned forward. "You didn't destroy me, Elise. You destroyed yourself. You just didn't feel the crash yet." She cried then. Real tears, and I felt nothing. No joy, no vindication. Just relief, because in that moment, I was truly free. I stood. You should go, she hesitated, then nodded and walked to the door. Before stepping out, she turned back. He's leaving. I think he knows someone's after him. Too late, I said. The door closed behind her with a kind of finality I hadn't expected. 2 days later, Marcus tried to withdraw $90,000 from a flagged account. He was arrested on the spot. Homeland found multiple fake IDs, a burner laptop, and half a dozen passports in his rental unit. Elise was questioned, but ultimately cooperated. She handed over correspondence, logs, and phone records that tied Marcus to similar cons. She wasn't prosecuted, but her name was forever marked. I didn't sue her. I didn't need to. Ethan handled the settlement. She relinquished all claims. To the house, to my pension, to anything tied to my name. She left with exactly what she came in with, nothing. I took 6 more months off flying. During that time, I volunteered with a veteran outreach program, helping soldiers returning from deployment reintegrate into civilian life. Men and women who'd come back to a world that had moved on without them. I understood that intimately. The stories I heard from them, divorces, empty houses, betrayed trusts, they weren't rare, they were common. I started speaking at support groups. Quietly, privately. No press. No drama. Just a pilot in a blue sweater telling the truth. What happened to Marcus? He took a plea deal, 8 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 6. He tried to throw Elise under the bus, but the evidence showed her cooperation. Helped sink him. As for Elise, she moved away. Oregon, I think. New job. Different life. She sent one more letter, handwritten, shaky, postmarked 2 months after the arrest. I live every day knowing what I did. I hope someday I'll be someone worth forgiving. I never replied. Some things don't need closure. Some things just need silence. The house felt different after she left. Not just emptier, but cleaner. Like her absence had lifted a static charge from the walls. I repainted the living room, tore down the gallery of black and white travel photos she once obsessed over, and replaced them with framed letters from pilots I'd trained, photos of aircraft I'd flown, and a hand-drawn picture from a kid I once met on a layover in Tokyo. IT was mine now, fully. Quietly. Undeniably, I sold the guest bed, donated the wine. Glasses we never used. Threw out the French press she loved but never cleaned. I wasn't angry, I was reclaiming space. There's something profoundly healing in making things your own again after betrayal. You don't rage. You rearrange. You don't destroy. You restore, and in that process, I started breathing again. I resumed flying after 10 months off. My first flight back was a red-eye from Seattle to Reykjavik. The cockpit welcomed me like a second skin, switches under fingertips, checklists like poetry, engines that roared not with chaos, but control. At 39,000 feet, with the stars spread like broken glass on velvet, I realized something Elise had never understood. This was never just a job. Flying had always been the one place where I could be myself without having to explain myself. No arguments. No false intimacy. Just physics, skill, and silence. My crew that night didn't ask about my absence. They didn't need to. Pilots, like soldiers, recognize when someone's been through something and come out changed. In the following months, I began training new recruits. Young, bright-eyed co-pilots who reminded me of who I once was before marriage, before betrayal, before bitterness. I taught them more than flight paths. I taught them the quiet parts. Never ignore your gut. keep something just for yourself. Even when you love deeply, and if someone ever betrays, you don't chase justice. Stand still and let the truth surface. It always does. One of the younger pilots, Melissa, was sharp, obsessively detail-oriented. On her third flight with me, she turned during cruise and asked, "Captain Briggs, how do you stay so calm when things go wrong?" I smiled, almost surprised by the softness in her tone, because I've already survived worse. I said, then came the letter, official. From the Department of Justice, they wanted me to testify at Marcus's formal sentencing hearing. Apparently, my statements and documentation were instrumental in solidifying the case. I didn't have to attend, but they said the judge appreciated when victims faced their perpetrators. I hesitated, not out of fear, but out of doubt. Would it change anything? Would looking him in the eye matter? In the end, I went. Not for revenge. Not even for closure. But for the men and women who'd been targeted before me and the ones who might come after. He was thinner. His trademark smugness replaced with something more brittle. Still wore the same expensive haircut, but the shine was gone. Like an expensive watch left in the rain, he barely looked at me as I walked in, but I looked at him. I looked at the man who'd seen soldiers not as people, but as loopholes, who'd viewed deployments as vulnerabilities to exploit, who'd used charm like a scalpel and manipulation like currency. When the judge asked if I had a statement, I stood, and this is what I said. I'm not here today as a victim. I'm here as a reminder that even people who fly 39,000 feet above ground can still be brought down by betrayal. But what you underestimated, Mr. Delaney, is what happens when you target someone who's been trained to keep going. When everything else fails. You thought distance made us weaker. You were wrong. It made us sharper. And today, you don't just answer to me, you answer to all the families you tried to ruin. He didn't respond. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but his face stayed blank. He was sentenced to 11 years. No early release after the hearing. I stepped outside into the afternoon sun. It was early fall. The air crisp, sharp with memory. I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. A year passed. I sold the house. I didn't need the space anymore it held. Too many echoes, and none of them were worth keeping. I bought a small place on the coast of Washington, 2 bedrooms, 1 deck facing the Pacific, and a fireplace that crackled like an old friend in winter. I volunteered part-time with a foundation that provided legal and emotional support to military spouses and deployed veterans facing financial abuse. We weren't loud about our work. But every week, someone new would walk through the door, carrying a manila folder and a broken voice. And I'd sit across from them, pour coffee and say, "I've been where you are. And I'm still flying." One night, as I closed up the small office we ran, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No return address. Inside was a photo of Elise. She was standing in front of a modest house, holding the hand of a young boy. A note was scribbled on the back. "I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying to be someone better now. You were right. I didn't crash until long after I left. And when I did, it wasn't Marcus standing beside me. It was no one. I hope life's treated you more kindly than I did." I didn't cry. I didn't even reply, but I folded the note and placed it in a small wooden box I keep tucked away in my desk drawer. Alongside it are the letters from veterans I've helped, notes from my cadets, and a single photo of my first solo flight, back when everything still felt wide open, because I don't live in the wreckage. I live in the rebuilding, and now when I take the skies, I fly not just to get somewhere, but to remind myself that even from the highest altitudes, you can still be grounded in something real, something earned, something no one can take, 6 months after Marcus's sentencing, I was offered a permanent training position at our airline's pilot academy in Colorado Springs. I took it, not because I needed the job, but because I needed the routine, the stillness, the clarity. My days became structured again. Wake at 6, coffee at 7, simulator by 8. I mentored pilots younger than I'd ever been when I first flew alone. Some of them had faces too soft for this world. Others had already seen too much. I told them stories not about Elise or Marcus or betrayal, just about navigation, trusting your equipment, watching the wind, reading the patterns, staying calm when alarms scream. They didn't know it, but I was teaching them more than flying. I was teaching them how to survive descent. One chilly morning in October, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something in my gut told me to pick up. Captain Briggs? A woman's voice said, "I'm with the Department of Veterans Affairs. We're contacting you because of a family in Fort Worth who recently came forward with a story similar to yours. They were victims of Marcus Delaney before his arrest. Their case was closed due to lack of evidence, but after hearing about your testimony, they reached out again." I leaned back in my chair, watching the golden sunlight cut through the frost on the window. What do they need from me? I asked. Nothing, she said. They just wanted to say thank you. The husband asked us to pass on a message. You didn't just save your own life. You helped save ours too. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. She added, he said. They're still together, trying to rebuild. Said your story gave him the strength to forgive her. After the call, I stood in the doorway of the hangar, listening to the quiet hum of engines winding down, and I realized that was what I'd been looking for this whole time. Not revenge, not even justice, but meaning, something to come from the ashes. It's been 3 years now. Elise never contacted me again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved back to her mother's town in Oregon. Works at a dental clinic. Lives alone. Raises a dog she adopted last spring. Some part of me hopes she's okay, not because I want her back, but because I know what it's like to live with regret. I've forgiven her. Quietly. From a distance. It's not an act of grace. It's an act of survival, because bitterness is a second kind of betrayal, the kind you do to yourself. I live in a small house now, near the edge of Pike National Forest. In the mornings, I drink my coffee on the porch. In the evenings, I walk the trails alone, Scout trotting ahead of me. There's no noise, no alarms, no lies, just wind in the trees. Sometimes, I think back to the night Elise sent that email. The 3-sentence bomb she dropped from 1,000 miles away. It used to haunt me. Now I see it as the moment I was set free, not immediately. Not without pain, but completely. She took everything, and in return, I got something better. I got to rebuild not the life we planned, but the one I never knew I needed. I became more than a husband, more than a pilot, more than a victim. I became me. To anyone listening, reading, watching who's been blindsided by the person they trusted most. You're not broken. You're not foolish. You're not over. You're airborne, and the landing might be rough, but I promise there's still blue sky ahead. Hold the controls level. Your wings, and keep flying. If you found this story powerful, subscribe to Revenge with DMA, where we honor those who rise after betrayal. And if you've ever been in a similar storm, tell us in the comments how you made it through. Your story could be the one that saves someone else.